हेलो एवरीवन। सो आप सभी लोगों के लिए एक क्वेश्चन है दैट हु इंट्रोड्यूस द स्टैंडर्ड एरर। सो आई एम गोइंग टू शो यू 4 options and I will be given 3 seconds to you all to answer this question. So your time starts now. Okay, so if you have chosen option number B, then congratulations, your answer is correct. So Carl Pearson introduced standard error. Who is Carl Pearson? Carl Pearson is your English mathematician and a statistician in the late 19th century, and he played a very important role in developing and clearly defining the standard error as a statistical measure. Now, here comes a question that what is standard error? So, a standard error is defined as the standard deviation of your sampling distribution of a statistic. Statistic can be mean, variance, it can be correlation. So, in simpler term, it provides an estimate of how much sample statistic would fluctuate if you were to take multiple samples from the same population. Basically, it measures the accuracy with which a sample distribution represents a population by evaluating variability or dispersion of a sampling statistic. Like we have used a term here, it is basically like a standard deviation of a sampling distribution. But what is the meaning of sampling distribution? So sampling distribution is a probability distribution of given statistic based on random samples. So like in simple terms, if I am saying, it represents the range of all possible values of sample statistic that can take if you were repeatedly taking samples from the population and calculate the statistic of each sample. So suppose in estimating, I have taken a scenario where I am estimating the mean height of students. So you can imagine that you want to estimate the average height of a student in a large school with 1000 students. So instead of measuring the height of every student, you decide to take a random sample of size 30 student each. Now, what is the first step? The first step is that you will take a sample and calculate the statistics. So from those 1000 students, suppose you have taken the first sample of 30 students and measure their heights and calculate the sample mean. That means the average height. So let us suppose it came out to be 165 centimeter. Now what will be your second step? The second step is that we have to repeat the same procedure again. We have to take second sample of again 30 students and we will measure their height and we will calculate the sample mean again. Suppose this time the sample mean is 167 centimeter. You keep repeating this procedure again you will take a sample of size 30 student and again you will calculate the mean each time. So now what will be the third step? The third step will be creating the distribution of these sample means. So suppose after collecting many samples, like just suppose we have taken total 100 samples of size 30. So after collecting many samples, you can plot these means on a graph. Each sample mean will be a point on this graph. So the distribution of these sample means is what we call sampling distribution. Okay, now coming back to the standard error. So suppose I have taken two statistics. One is mean and other is correlation. So what is the formula for the standard error of sample mean? It is S upon root n, where what is S? S is the standard deviation of your sample and n is your sample size. Similarly, standard error of correlation is represented by 1 minus r square upon root of n, where what is r? R is sample correlation. Right, it is the correlation between the random variable x and y, and you can also call it the sample correlation. And n is again the sample size. Okay, now what is the interpretation that we can give with the values of a standard error if it is coming large and if it is coming small? So if we have smaller values of a standard error, it means that sample mean or sample correlation is likely close to the population mean or population correlation. Like it is approximately equal. Okay, like it suggests you that your sample statistic is more accurate estimate of the population parameter. Similarly, if you are getting a large standard error, it will indicate more variability in sample mean and or you can call it sample correlation, and it will suggest you that sample mean or sample correlation may not be as close to the true population mean. Right, so like this is just a simple interpretation of your standard error. Like in what cases we generally use a standard error? First is that in building the confidence interval. There are like several situations in which we can use the standard error. First is your building your confidence interval. So standard error is used to calculate the confidence interval around a sample statistic, whether it is your sample mean or your sample correlation. So it will provide you a range within which your population parameter will be expected to lie. Now, again, the second case where you can use a standard error is in testing of hypothesis. So standard error is basically used to determine the importance of sample statistic while testing hypothesis. So these are some of the uses of a standard error. Now, based on the standard error, a question was asked in your ISS 2023. So if you want to see the solution of that question, you can just check out that video on the screen.